Welcome. Here in the U.S., the presidential race is gradually gaining momentum, but the general election is still 18 months off. So today we turn our attention to an historic presidential vote that just took place in Africa's most populous country, Nigeria. For the first time since military rule ended in 1999, Nigerians have elected an opponent of a ruling party, ousting President Goodluck Jonathan. His regime had failed to rescue those 276 schoolgirls kidnapped a year ago or to defeat the Islamist insurgency in the north. Nigeria explained in a moment. Also on the broadcast, the youngest member of the New York City Council, Ritchie Torres. He hopes to change police behavior through legislation. Then, as thousands of high school seniors torment themselves over where to go to college, New York Times columnist Frank Bruni will be here with this advice: where you go is not who you'll be. And finally, the circus, not Ringling Brothers, but the highly diverse and urban Universal Circus, which is celebrating its 21st anniversary. First, though, Nigeria, a country of 177 million, half Christian, half Muslim. Muhammadu Buhari is the new president. His party has won landslide against the regime of President Goodluck Jonathan. Buhari campaigned on putting a stop to Boko Haram, the Islamist extremists who have spent the last 6 years rampaging across northern Nigeria, attempting to establish a caliphate. To deepen our understanding, we are joined by Mojubaolu Olufunke Okome, professor of political science, Africa, and women's studies at Brooklyn College and founder of Bring Back Our Girls NYC. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Can you start with Bring Back Our Girls NYC? This week is the one-year anniversary of the kidnapping, isn't it?
Today is 365 days.
Today, as we tape, Tuesday.
Today, Tuesday, as we tape,
will air during the week.
Yes, is the 365th day. And Bring Back Our Girls NYC was founded by a group of us who are African, Nigerian, Americans, people from a multiplicity of nationalities, and also interfaith group, to continue to bring attention to this matter and insist that the Nigerian government has to rescue the kidnapped girls from Chibok, as well as restore peace to the northeastern states.
Were the girls kidnapped solely to prevent them from going to school because it's against the theology of Boko Haram?
I think essentially yes, because Boko Haram itself has said as much. And Boko Haram also threatened or stated clearly that it wanted to marry off the girls, and it would sell them to whomever wanted to marry them for $12 a piece.
Incredible. Just unbelievable.
Yes.
What do you think pressure from groups like yours can accomplish if they've been so impervious to international pressure in this full year?
Luckily, we are having a change in administration. But I also have to say that the Goodluck Jonathan administration postponed the presidential election for 6 weeks, ostensibly to fight Boko Haram, so that it would bring peace to the areas that the northeastern states, so voting could go on. It also claimed that it was going to recover the girls. And I think that for the first time since this horrible incident happened, the government fought Boko Haram. Unfortunately, it did so also with mercenaries from South Africa, apartheid South Africa mercenaries. And it is shocking that the government could find the capacity to fight Boko Haram, and it didn't do so all along. So I think to us it seems like a cynical ploy to just garner more support by being seen to be serious about that area of the country, liberating the area from Boko Haram depredation.
By the way, why do you say apartheid South African mercenaries. Didn't apartheid end in South Africa in the 1990s?
Apartheid ended, but there are mercenaries who were organized during the apartheid era who are now available for hire. And the Nigerian government got some of them.
Does the new government offer a new opportunity to find the girls and, in general, defeat Boko Haram?
I think what we have insisted on is that the government of Nigeria owes the duty and responsibility to recover the girls, because it's supposed to be more concerned about the welfare and security of its citizens. If a group like Boko Haram is able to just run roughshod through a whole vast area of the country, it's a challenge to Nigeria's territorial integrity and sovereignty. So we keep insisting. Actually, I would have great admiration for Goodluck Jonathan if he could find the girls tomorrow and present them to us. However, we also are going to hold the government of Muhammadu Buhari to account and insist that he recovers the girls. He has argued, he has told us, the people of Nigeria, that this is foremost on his agenda: fighting Boko Haram, recovering the girls, bringing peace to the area. So we are taking him seriously, and we're going to insist that he does this.
And this was the top issue in the election? Because, sometimes what happens in this country when it comes to media coverage of other countries is that the thing that's relevant to us is what we think the election is all about. I think it just happened with Israel, to take another example. We thought, oh, it's Netanyahu says he's coming to Congress and speaking against Iran and says he speaks for all the Jewish people of the world. But really, they were concerned about the economy. They were concerned about, other things in the domestic context. Nigeria, too? Because we, of course, want to talk about the Islamists.
Well, Nigeria, too. The economy is a very serious matter. The oil market has declined precipitously. The price of oil internationally, I think, is about $50-something a barrel. Nigeria has a high level of dependence on the sale of petroleum. So the fact that this is in jeopardy is very scary to many people. Also, the government of Goodluck Jonathan promised that it was going to really be activist on the economy, and it didn't deliver to the people. There's a high level of inequality in Nigeria. We have about 60% of people living on less than $2 a day. Their lives are not improved by any kind of economic turmoil that is visited upon them. So this is of concern to many people. There are also big businessmen whom the government listened to, whose resources are threatened by these economic problems. Plus, secondly, we have the northeastern states of Nigeria under this Boko Haram attack. Without cohesive and effective strategy to fight them by the government, there's also corruption. And that corruption has permeated into all aspects of Nigerian political institutions, including the military, which is why they couldn't fight Boko Haram so effectively. And the girls were abducted. Sadly, they're not the only young women to have been abducted. They're not the first to have been abducted. After them also, more were abducted. So a lot of people, especially those in these areas, were very disturbed by the fact that the government wasn't protecting them and didn't seem to be concerned about their well-being. There's also a lot of internally displaced people, more than 1 million, about 1.6 million, according to the UN, and millions of refugees in West African states. So people's lives have been thrown into turmoil, and they want to have a government that promises them with a kind of reasonable guarantee that an end would be put to all this. So these were very big issues in the elections.
And that's quite a list. Can you talk more about the corruption, especially how it affects the military and the search for the girls? Who would be paying somebody, I assume that's what corruption involves, to do something or not do something that would affect that search?
Oh, the military was not properly armed. They complained about this. I think the budget for the military is more than $6 billion. They were not outfitted with body armor. They claimed that Boko Haram was better armed than they were. The heads of the armed services are alleged to have embezzled a great amount of the resources that was supposed to arm and outfit them and make them able to fight Boko Haram successfully. There's also, this pervasive amount of impunity with which people mismanage government resources. In Nigeria, and the Goodluck Jonathan administration was perceived as not really effective in quelling these excesses by ministers and officials in his administration.
President-elect Buhari is being hailed now for defeating the Goodluck Jonathan administration in a historic victory for democracy, really because Jonathan conceded without a fight. But Buhari himself was in power once before as the leader of a coup. Late 1990s was that? So is he a Democrat, small d?
If he's a Democrat, it's because he has learned over the course of contesting elections 4 times. This is his 4th time that he won. And in order to win, he had to build a coalition that enabled him to do so. Now, I am gratified that we have had a turnover from the ruling party to an opposition party for the first time since 1999. However, the pattern of voting in the election shows a great deal of polarization in the country, with the South-South region and the Southeast region voting, overwhelmingly for the PDP, which is the ruling party. And then, Southwest and the North in general voting for the challenging party, the APC, and President-elect Buhari. So I think that seeing this pattern of voting means that Buhari has a great deal of work to do to bring the country together, to convince those who are mistrustful of him that he is a president of all Nigerians. Also, having been a dictator, he needs to model that he understands the essence of democracy, and he's able to work in the spirit and letter of the Constitution to rule Nigeria, to govern Nigeria effectively. When he was, I think people forget that even the first post-military President Obasanjo, was a military man. And he was equally dictatorial, because when a person has a coup, they suspend the Constitution. And Obasanjo also had a heavy hand as a military ruler. And he came, I guess, maybe he convinced Nigerians that he was a Democrat because he was able to somehow live in the spirit and letter of the law. So I think this is a capacity that we have to trust that Buhari has. In any case, the Nigerian people also have a role to play, that they have to put Buhari's feet to the fire and ensure that he lives up to the promises that he's made.
In our last 30 seconds, how optimistic are you?
About Nigeria?
Yes.
I'm an eternal optimist, particularly when it comes to Nigeria, because I don't think I think Nigerians know that this is an opportunity for us to come together and help our country to realize its potential. Nigeria has natural resources. It has bright people. It has people with a great deal of imagination, a lot of youth. So we have a lot of what it takes to make a great nation. We have the largest economy in Africa, and we can bring all that together and make a good democracy that we can all be proud of.
Well, I hope things do turn up, and now more New Yorkers know some of the basics about Nigeria at this moment. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
If you look at the numbers, the policing method called stop and frisk has all but disappeared in the New York City neighborhoods where it was most applied, down 90% under the de Blasio administration. But critics say police still have far too much discretion in how they confront citizens on the street. A new bill from Bronx Councilman Ritchie Torres addresses this. It would require police officers to identify themselves, explain the reason when they have made a stop, and inform civilians of their Fourth Amendment right to refuse search and seizure without probable cause or a warrant. It's called the Right to Know Act. Councilman Torres, who represents the Central Bronx, tells us about that and more. Thank you very much for joining us.
It's an honor to be here.
This seems like such common sense that an officer who stops somebody in a non-emergency situation would tell them why they were being stopped.
Look, I've been stopped myself, especially for interactions that result in either a summons or an arrest. You're left wondering, well, who is stopping me and why I'm being stopped? And so all the law would do is create on the part of a police officer an affirmative obligation to identify who he is and explain the reason for the stop.
So it's not the law right now, but it is police policy, but it's not always followed. Would that be an accurate way to describe the current situation?
Well, under state law, if you ask an officer to identify himself, he's required to do so. But if you're a civilian, you might be too fearful to ask. And even if you do ask, there's no telling how the officer will respond, because encounters between police and civilians can be tense and can unfold unpredictably. And so to remove the potential for escalating the encounter, the best thing to do is to require the officer to proactively identify himself and proactively explain why he's stopping you in the first place.
So it's not just to get police officers to be more courteous for its own sake, it's to make it less likely that encounters will escalate.
Part of it is preventing escalation, but the motto of the NYPD is professionalism, respect, and courtesy. Part of it is it's part of the Right to Know Act is it fits into a broader conversation about broken windows policing. That in the world of broken windows policing, in a world where the NYPD is aggressively policing even the lowest of low-level offenses, you're inevitably going to have more encounters between police and civilians. And so the goal of the Right to Know Act is to ensure that those encounters are conducted in keeping with the best standards of transparency, accountability, constitutionality. So identification is one component. The second component is consensus search. And consensus search would require an officer to inform you of your Fourth Amendment right to decline a search that is not based on probable cause or warrant or an arrest.
When can you decline a search? How do you know as an individual whether something that an officer says he wants to search you for is based on what would be considered probable cause under the law?
Well, if you've committed a crime, then an officer is free to search you. Or if an officer has a warrant, then he's free to search you. Or probable cause. So if none of those circumstances are present, then an officer cannot search you without your consent.
Well, they're searching you often to see if you've committed a crime.
Well, if an officer has reason to suspect that you've committed a crime, then he can stop and question you. If he suspects that you are armed and dangerous, he can frisk you, which is a limited self-protective search for his own safety. And if an officer has probable cause to believe that you've actually committed a crime, at that point, he's free to search you against your will and against your consent.
Commissioner Bratton would say that broken windows policing is very different from the stop and frisk juggernaut that we had hundreds of thousands of stops and frisks a year under Commissioner Kelly. How much do you agree with that?
It is distinct, but my concern is that broken windows policing is creating more contact with the criminal justice system. So it's creating more encounters that have physical consequences. So you're going to have more cases of injury or death, as you did in the case of Eric Garner. And then you're going to have more collateral consequences, more, particularly young men of color, coming into contact with the criminal justice system. And once you have an arrest or a criminal record, it's a stigma that haunts you for the rest of your life, that limits your access to employment, housing, education, the whole 9 yards.
More people having contact with the criminal justice system, even after you take away those 700,000 stops and frisks a year?
I think in a world of broken windows policing, you're going to have more contact with the criminal justice system, yes.
Now, the commissioner would say that the difference is, or a big difference is, that broken windows policing is primarily responsive to complaints from the community. So in whatever neighborhood it is, it's local people calling in and saying, do something about the drug dealing on my corner, do something about this constant noise or illegal, I hate to use the Eric Garner example, but do something about the incessant selling of illegal cigarettes in front of my store. And it's real actual actions by individuals rather than this sort of random stop and frisk that generates the contact, so it's more legitimate. Do you agree?
Yes, I do. I mean, he has a point, right? But I feel there's an element of cognitive dissonance to the public's attitude toward policing. So it reminds me of taxes and services. Everyone wants more services, but no one wants the taxes that pay for those services. So everyone wants quality of life policing that removes the nuisances from their neighborhoods, but no one wants the collateral consequences that come with quality of life policing. It could mean that your nephew or your son has an arrest record that could render him unemployable for the rest of his life. So I think our attitude toward broken windows policing is one of cognitive dissonance. And in my district, I represent a majority-minority district, so the divide around quality of life policing is more generational than racial.
More generational. So older people want more police contact because they feel more threatened in general, right?
Right. And I think the younger population feels harassed at the hands of the police. So there's a generational divide in those attitudes toward quality of life policing. But the commissioner has a point, but it's more complicated than he's making it out to be.
And so the right to know law is an attempt to bridge that divide, one attempt to bridge that divide?
It's an attempt to make, if we're going to have broken windows policing, if it's a fait accompli, right, the commissioner said it's the stated policy and philosophy of the police department, then how can we make those encounters more courteous, more professional, more respectful? When an officer makes an effort to identify himself and explain the reason for the stop, it's a show of transparency, accountability, and respect, because there is a power imbalance, and so this bill is an attempt to rectify that imbalance.
Since the shooting in South Carolina the other day of a man fleeing, the officer who shot him in the back, that horrific incident, there's been even more talk about body cameras for police. That's one of the responses of the North Charleston, South Carolina Police Department is, okay, we're getting body cameras for all the cops. How important do you think that is for New York City, and where are we on that now?
So I'm wholeheartedly supportive of body cameras. I know the commissioner is going to pilot, equipping the police force in a few precincts, but we should recognize that body cameras is no magic bullet. It's only one solution among many, and the encounter with Eric Garner was videotaped, but of course that resulted in no indictment. So body cameras, as shown in the Eric Garner case, has its limitations.
How much are you concerned about a downside of body cameras being that a lot of civilians are going to be caught on those recordings who may be doing something at a low level? Most encounters with the police are acting legitimately, and probably the person's doing something they shouldn't be doing. And then those are going to be recorded on tape and talk about having trouble getting into college or a job application after an arrest. Boy, now they can go to the videotape if they get leaked. Are you concerned about that?
Well, if you're committing a serious crime, then you should be held accountable.
Correct.
But if it's a minor crime, body cameras is only one tool among many in pursuit of police reform. And the city council is in the process of taking a comprehensive look at the administrative code and identifying a list of minor offenses that either could be converted into summonsable offenses or decriminalized altogether. And so that's a process that we're pursuing in consultation with the NYPD.
City Council is recommending the hiring of 1,000 additional police officers as part of your budget this year. That was proposed last year, too. The de Blasio administration rejected it last year and opposes it again this year. Why more police officers if you're concerned about too much contact already?
Well, the council at large is advocating for 1,000 more police officers. I am a skeptic. I know the commissioner has a vision for community policing, but I hear the word community policing, and if you ask 1,000 people what it means, you'll elicit 1,000 different responses. So it seems to me the request for 1,000 more police officers is disconnected from a real, clearly defined, concrete vision for police reform. And, you know, $100 million spent on 1,000 more police officers at a time of historically low crime rates is $100 million not spent on confronting the homelessness crisis, $100 million not spent on reinvesting in our dilapidated public housing stock. So we have to make a hard choice about whether that's the best use of our resources.
So you're not in sync with the council leadership in this case?
I'm skeptical. I have questions. You know, if the commissioner can persuade me that he has a clearly defined vision for police reform and that 1,000 more police officers is critical to making that vision a reality, then I'm open to supporting it. But at the moment, I'm skeptical.
I know housing is another major interest of yours on the council. In particular, what right now? Things having to do with public housing?
Well, I mean, think about the affordability crisis more broadly. You know, we're seeing levels of homelessness that we've never seen before. 60,000 people, a disproportionate share of whom are families. You know, many of them are employed. So, you know, you always have the phrase, the working poor. We now have the employed homeless, people who have jobs yet find themselves in a homeless shelter. We have over 200,000 families on the waiting list for public housing, on the waiting list for Section 8. You know, since the beginning of the decade, we've lost about 400,000 units renting at $1,000 or less. And we have a public housing stock that's in a state of catastrophic decline. It has about $16 billion with a B, worth of unmet capital needs, which is to say that NYCHA does not have the resources it needs to repair all the broken bricks and roofs and elevators and boilers and all the systems and structures that desperately need repair. So we have monumental challenges here in New York City.
So where does that funding come from? It used to come from Washington a lot more than it does.
Well, you know, NYCHA implicates every level of government. So, you know, it's largely regulated and funded by the federal government. It's an authority, therefore a creature of the state government. And the chair of NYCHA is appointed by the mayor, so it functions as a mayoral agency. So every level of government has a role in supporting NYCHA. But the state and the city have to play a much greater role in funding NYCHA because we're living in a world of federal disinvestment from cities. And that's something we have to grapple with.
How's your experience in council been so far? You're a freshman, right?
The newest kid on the block.
Newest kid on the block. Yeah. You're the youngest member of city council, I'm told, right?
Fast aging, yes.
Fast aging. Yes. That government will do that to you. But you've been in a year and a little bit right now. So what's it been like for you? And are we entering the progressive era of government in New York City that a lot of people assumed when Bill de Blasio became mayor and Mark Viverito became speaker?
Well, you know, the reality of progressive governance is more complicated than the rhetoric. And, you know, the expectations of city government are high, but there's a limit to a city's ability to fight inequality without more support from Albany and without more support from Washington. Our ability to address the core inequalities confronting our city are heavily dependent on political forces beyond our control, political dynamics in Washington and Albany, which are endlessly frustrating. And so that has been the greatest challenge that I've had trouble coming to grips with.
Well, since we're going into a federal election cycle now, president and Congress, what are the biggest things you might want from Washington or want to see in a presidential hopeful? Mayor de Blasio, as you know, is holding out his own endorsement of Hillary Clinton, which presumably will come, but he wants to see some progressive policies first that would help New York.
You know, my concern is not, you know, if Hillary Clinton were elected president, I suspect she would make every effort to do right by New York City. But no matter if a Democrat is elected, you're going to have to grapple with an intransigent Republican opposition in both the Senate and the House of Representatives. And I worry that if we do elect a Democrat, the next Democrat is going to be every bit as hamstrung as President Obama has been by the Republican opposition. But my greatest hope is that we do enter an era, that we leave the era of austerity, and that the federal government reinvests in our cities, because we cannot address the affordability crisis. A dilapidated, you know, the MTA has a $15 billion gap. You know, we cannot address these monumental challenges without more investment from Washington. So our ability to fight inequality depends on strong support from Washington.
Last thing, this week through Sunday, people in your district, among others, can vote for certain capital projects within the district under what's called participatory voting. A lot of people don't realize. And you don't have to be a citizen. You just have to be living in the district. And you have to be how old?
Oh, you have to be 16.
16. So not 18, as in conventional
We're lowering
elections.
the age.
You want to just give a quick plug to participatory voting and what people can do in your district between now and Sunday?
Well, just first a quick context. So I represent about like 160,000 residents, yet only 6,000 residents in my district vote. So there's a crisis of civic engagement. And so I see PB as a tool for creating a civic life in a district that historically has had a limited civic infrastructure. But PB is a process by which, residents can play a role in deciding how $1 million is spent in their own neighborhood. So rather than the council member determining how to spend those dollars unilaterally, we're ceding the power to the residents themselves.
So there's something like 15 projects, and people can choose 5?
Parks, park improvements, school improvements, libraries, cameras, the public will decide, and the proposals that get the most votes get funded. But it's not only about voting, it's a year-long deliberative process. And so we've held a series of neighborhood assemblies where members of my district were actively deliberating on what kind of projects we could fund with $1 million.
So even for next year, people should know, put suggestions in front of Councilman Torres or whoever your council member, for the capital needs in your district, in your immediate neighborhood, right?
For me, it's an example of bringing government directly to the people. And there is no shortage of cynicism about elected officials and about government. And so I see PB as a step toward overcoming that cynicism.
Well, thank you for joining us.
Of course, thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you.
It's that time of year again when high school seniors, having learned which colleges want nothing to do with them, must choose among those schools which will take a chance on them. That is, if the students have any choice at all. Maybe they only got into their safety school. It can be a distressing time, in part because of the widespread belief that the college one attends decides the rest of one's life. New York Times columnist Frank Bruni tears that logic apart in his new book, Where You Go Is Not Who You'll Be, an antidote to the college admissions mania. Hi, Frank. Welcome.
Thanks.
Mania. Strong word.
Yeah, it's a strong situation. It's a pretty crazy situation. And I don't know how many people you've watched go through it, but something that was always an anxiety-producing process has become, in this era, this juncture where parents and kids really seem to believe, as you said in your introduction, that what happens on a few days in late March and early April is going to set the trajectory of the rest of their lives. And if they believe that about an elite school, and they think that school's name is going to do the talking for them for the rest of their lives, they're in trouble. But if they believe that not going to an elite school is going to consign them to failure, that's just as misguided, and I'm trying to move people past that.
How did we get to this point? Was it always like this?
It was always a little bit like this, and now it's like that on steroids. I mean, I think part of it is we're in an era of economic pessimism, and I think parents don't believe the way they once did that their kids will have a better life, that the country's future is brighter. So they want to give kids any leg up possible, and they see a highly selective school as a leg up. Part of it is fed by the schools themselves. We live in an era where schools use their acceptance rates as bragging rights. So they are drumming up applications with a ferociousness like never before, just so they can reject people and then say, look, we only take 7% of our applicants. Aren't we exclusive? Aren't we desirable?
And there are more schools doing that than ever before?
Absolutely.
Because there are more applicants than ever before?
Yeah, applicants are coming from more corners of the country. They're coming from more corners of the globe. The international student population is up. And then each person is applying to more schools than ever before because it's all done with the wonders of the internet and cut and paste. When I was applying to college, I remember having a bottle of whiteout at the ready. Do you remember that liquid paper, whiteout?
Yeah, before the little thing called word processing.
Exactly, that little thing called word processing that changed everything, yeah.
Well, to what degree is it not true that where you go will determine who you are, at least professionally?
Well, it's not true in every which way, because if you look at the successful people around you, they traveled any number of different paths to that success. We tell a selective story in our country. So right now we're beginning a presidential race, right? If you read profiles of Ted Cruz, right away you'll hear that he went to Princeton and Harvard, as if that explains his altitude. But if you read profiles of Marco Rubio, you won't hear as quickly or as often that he went to the University of Florida, because that's somehow incidental. So both of these people got to the cusp of the presidency or wherever, however far they'll get, only one do we hear about his background in education.
I don't know if president is the best measure of all this, but Obama went to Columbia and Harvard. The Clintons went to Yale Law School. Bush went to Yale Law School, So, I mean, they are going to the most elite schools.
I have a retort to that. Obama began at Occidental. So if he had treated that senior year moment as this is the rest of my life, he did not begin in the Ivy League. The Bushes both went to Yale. So did their forebear, Prescott Bush. Was Yale the springboard for the Bushes to the presidency? Or was Yale an inevitable stop on a road that was paved by their bloodline and by privilege? We have to stop confusing correlation with causation.
There are a lot more good colleges than there used to be, too.
Yes, because more and more kids are going to college. So the marketplace is bigger. Those colleges are competing in a way they never did before for those kids. In some ways, that's a bad thing because it means the sort of application drumming up. But in other ways, it means that a lot of colleges have taken great pains and spent a lot of money to upgrade themselves and to play at a higher level.
Another way to look at the market and what kind of quality education it might produce nationwide is to look at professors looking for jobs, which is so unbelievably competitive in most fields. Right? There are so many really smart, really good teachers, too, academics, who can't get into the Ivies themselves, and they spread out over lots of state schools and other things around the country who are really bright people, incredibly educated, doing amazing research, and they may be good teachers to boot.
And a lot of those other schools will pay a higher salary or will make a different arrangement to have a glittering faculty member. So, yeah, I mean, you find amazing faculty at every kind of school, and you always have. I mean, one of the people I profile in the book is Condoleezza Rice, who went, most people don't know this, they hear her name, and they immediately think Stanford, because she was the provost there and she teaches there. She went to the University of Denver, both as an undergraduate and as a doctoral student, and one of the reasons is because she found a professor there who became an academic mentor. That person was Madeleine Albright's father. And even then, he was teaching at the University of Denver.
Don't you have a chart in your book where the top 10 CEO, that is the CEOs of the top 10 companies in the Fortune 500 went?
I look at where they went as undergraduates. And of those CEOs of the top 10 at the moment I was looking in the Fortune 500, I think the companies are still the same, only one went to a school that we consider highly selective, Dartmouth College. The rest, it was schools you've never heard of or state universities that are wonderful, wonderful schools, but don't make people's hearts go pitter-patter and their knees go weak.
What does that tell you?
It tells you that you can be a driven, you can be a competent, you can be a person bound for greatness, and you don't need to be draped in ivy. It's who you are, and more importantly, it's how you use school. It's not the name of the school you went to, it's what you demanded from that school and what you demanded from yourself.
This also assumes that everyone blooms at the same age, at 16, 17, those years that are going to determine what school you get into.
Right. If you believe that the college admissions juncture will be predictive, you're believing that everyone's shown their best stuff at the end of high school or by the end of high school. One of my favorite stories in the book is a gentleman who had a 2.9 GPA in high school, didn't do so well on the SATs, went to Kenyon College back when they took 50%, 50 of their applicants, and then even in his first years at Kenyon didn't hit his stride, and after taking an original creative writing course, was denied admission to the next course because he wasn't good enough. That gentleman's name is John Green. He's the author of The Fault in Our Stars.
So he
bloomed a little later.
Those can be exceptions. I mean, there are connections, right? You make connections at the elite schools, if you can get into the elite schools, that can then catapult your career afterwards.
Yes, and especially elite graduate schools. I mean, that's undeniable. But how profound is that catapult, to use the word you used, which is a great one, and how lasting? We talk about it as if it is the be-all and end-all, and as if it's going to settle everything for you for the rest of your life. And that's just, it's a matter of degree. That's not true. It's an advantage. It's not everything.
There seem to be kind of contradictory tracks in our public discussion right now about colleges. One is, yes, there's this unbelievable pressure in, better suburbs, in the good schools in New York City, et cetera, to get into schools that are considered super elite. At the same time, there's all this conversation about how a college degree is not worth the paper that it's printed on. It's certainly not worth the paper that you've taken out your $100,000 of student loans on, because it's not making the difference between getting a good job or not in the way that it used to be. So in a way, we're overvaluing college and we're starting to devalue college at exactly the same time.
Well, I reject the college not necessarily being worth it argument, because that argument is held along vocational terms. It's looking at college as an investment that must show a certain return. And I think the real returns on the investment of college, if you are fortunate enough to be able to afford it or to escape it without too great a burden of debt, the real return on that investment is stuff you can't measure by bank account. It's intellectual. It's a matter of your soul. I think college is the place where you kind of figure out who you are in the world, what you're good at and what you're not good at, not in a purely practical term. And it's where you have this span of life before you become too subsumed by mortgages and all that sort of stuff, to really let your mind wander and to let your intellect grow more nimble.
But that's going to be true in any case, right? Almost no matter what school you go to.
That's my point.
But then there's going to be an economic difference for a lot of people. That's why they want to get into the better schools, because the economic tickets are, that's, as you say, we live in an era of economic pessimism.
But how pervasive an economic difference, I mean, Howard Schultz, he went to Northern Michigan State University.
CEO of Starbucks.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, he's in the book. I mean, when I was doing the book, I went in search of people of great accomplishments, and so those are the people we look at. And I looked for people who had gone to schools that nobody had ever heard of or nobody would ever aspire to. And it was so easy to find these people because they're all over the place. It is a lie to say that you have to go to a highly selective school to get where you want to get in life.
I was talking to Malcolm Gladwell recently about his recent book, David and Goliath, in which there's a chapter about a girl who got into Brown and the University of Maryland, and she wanted to be in science. And of course she chose Brown because...
And Brown killed, I read that, Brown, I mentioned it in my book, Brown killed her interest in science because she was in an environment so overcrowded with overachievers that she began to doubt herself. With the converse of that, and this is where you find a lot of these kinds of people in my book, are people who went from pressure cooker high schools to colleges that maybe the pressure was a little bit less. Yeah. And they suddenly found their stride. They found a swagger. They realized in a way they never had before just how competent they were and how confident they could be. One of the kids in the book went from a suburban Chicago high school that's as intense as it gets to Indiana University, flourished there so incredibly that he ended up with the exact kind of boutique job everybody wants out of an Ivy League school, and right now he's finishing up his business degree at Harvard.
And so the really smart people or the really educated people, because they went to pressure cooker high schools, will do well, presumably almost wherever they go. So if they're in a more average environment, they'll be stars.
They might. I mean, this varies from every person. I mean, no two individuals respond to their environment in the same way. And one of the issues I have with people choosing colleges based solely on where they're ranked by U.S. News is it ignores the fact that you got to make a fit here. You've got to make a match. Right. Different people in the same way that different people flourish at different moments of life, different people flourish in different environments.
What about the self-esteem question for people watching right now who themselves or maybe their parents are watching, and for their kids who've gotten a whole bunch of rejection notices? I gather you don't get the thin envelope in the mail anymore.
No,
it's
all electronic.
And you look up your student application code number.
Yeah,
and
something
you're told
like that.
In, out, waiting list.
Yeah, no, and it's a brutal process for a lot of them.
But if you get rejection, reassure them about themselves.
Well, first of all, a lot of those rejections are coming from schools that take fewer than 15 or fewer than 10% of their applicants. So for starters, look at those odds. And then just know that there are a lot of ways in which the system is, I mean, rigged maybe isn't the right word, but people get into schools because they have particular hooks. That's the verbiage that's used. They're a child of an alumnus. They're a great athlete in a sport that the school fields. They're a great musician of a type the school needs at that moment. This is not an objective, straightforward evaluation of worth. That is truer than true, and so you cannot look at it as a mirror that tells you who you are.
What do you think about these honors colleges within mediocre, quote-unquote, schools, where they're trying to attract relatively small numbers of higher achieving kids and giving them all kinds of perks, their own dorms to live in, smaller class sizes than the other students get. Did you look into that at all? It seems to be very widespread.
It is. It's a little bit too widespread because not all honors colleges are created equal. I actually talk a bit in the book about one that I think is quite exemplary, which is the Barrett Honors College at Arizona State University. And there, I don't think they're doing anything cynical. I think they're just trying to make sure that particularly driven kids at ASU, who don't want to go spend the kind of money you do at Yale or Harvard, who are from in-state, that they have an option that gives them the kind of intellectual rigor and the kind of class size and all that that they get elsewhere. In that case, I think it works really well and is a terrific thing to have.
Were you motivated to write this book just because you as a journalist saw something in the culture, or did you have some personal connection to this that made you think, oh my God, more people have to know what I know?
No, it was mostly what I saw in the culture. My personal connection is most of my friends, my siblings are of an age where their kids are going through this. I saw this frenzy that was predicated on the belief that going to an elite college was going to mean everything in life, and it didn't match up with reality as I saw and knew it. And I felt like that's a story. And I wrote a column on it, and the response I got to that column convinced me that I should elaborate it into a book.
Well, hopefully you've put some people's minds and hearts and souls at ease a little bit in this fraught month and given us a little more perspective on how to look at education in America today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Up next, send in the clowns and the acrobats, too. It's the Universal Circus with the emphasis on soul. Maybe you've been to the Big Apple Circus or Ringling Brothers or Cirque du Soleil, but this is something different. The Universal Circus is highly diverse and urban, and it's celebrating its 21st anniversary. The Universal Circus, performing now in Brooklyn and moving on to Queens and Newark, aims to entertain but also display positive role models for kids. Before we learn about its origins and goals for the future from someone with the circus, let's see 2 minutes of the action under this big top. I get nervous watching people do things like that. A glimpse of the Universal Circus. Hank Ernest has been explaining its attractions and mission since 1998. He joins us via Skype from Atlanta. Welcome. Hi from New York tonight.
Greetings, Brian. Great to see you.
Tell us how the Universal Circus got started.
Well, sure. First of all, just a little help. How about Universal Circus? Can you do that?
I think I've been doing that. I thought I was doing that. Universal, S-O-U-L. I hear you.
Universal Circus. Well, the circus has been around, as you said, for 21 years, and I can tell you it's been a labor of love for all of those involved. And one of the things that the owner of the circus, his name is Cedric Walker, he's of Atlanta, born and raised in Baltimore. He had an idea back about, the early 90s that, let's find some entertainment that gets whole families together. He had been a promoter of rap concerts, and he had been a promoter of gospel plays. And one of the rap concerts he did was the Fresh Festival that traveled all across the country, the first large-scale rap festival to travel the country. And what he noticed was the kids would go to the rap festival, and then sometimes the parents would take the kids along with them to the gospel plays, and the kids were often bored, but at least they were trying to get the kids out with them. So we wanted to find something that fit a cross-section of ages and race and sex, so that men, women, grandparents, uncles, aunts, kids 5 years old, kids 15 years old, kids 18 years old would want to come together and be together as a family and have a great deal of fun. And that's what he did. So ever since then, he put the idea together. I think they were trying to come up with something like a variety show. They were trying to figure out how can we get these different type of acts together in one room. And somebody said, well, let's get elephants and lions and tigers. And somebody said, well, let's just do a circus. So that's what they did.
So is the content different from other circuses because it's a black context or to appeal to black families?
Well, we certainly believe it appeals to everybody. You can talk about Motown, and Motown appealed to everyone.
Sure.
So same thing with Soul Train. So that's what we're trying to be. Yes, it is quite different. I've been to a circus before, and I've sat down at a circus and looked down below and saw the acts coming up and down the way, and it was fun. But was it exciting? I think what we've done is we've put a lot, I would say, of excitement in the circus. So when you're talking about coming to a Universal Circus, you're not coming there to sit down. You're not coming there to politely clap. You're going to come, you're going to be entertained, you're going to stand, you're going to dance, you're going to clap, you're going to high five the ringmaster. You're going to be so close that, you're going to feel the breeze of the high wire. It's just an incredible experience for all the senses. Again, you're going to be up, you're going to be dancing, you're going to be having a ball at the Universal Circus.
And the 21st anniversary, has it changed much over the years?
It has. We keep up with the times. We update the music. We often change the acts. We bring technology, high tech, with the lights and sound. We have DJs. We have acts from around the world. So we keep updating it to keep it fresh. And I think our audience wants to see something new every year. So we're not going to, have something that you saw the year and the year before and the year before. It's going to be something fresh and new every year.
How much traveling do you do?
Well, I'll tell you, I used to do a lot more than I do now. And I wish I did more, but it's exciting. I go from city to city often, wherever they need me, so to speak. But for the circus itself, they travel, they start the season in February or late January, and they end at the end of November. And so if you're thinking about the circus right now in New York, well, in months from now, they're still going. And it's an amazing journey for a lot of those performers who it's their first time in the United States. So to be able to go from coast to coast to see the major cities of this country, they have a ball. It's a learning experience for them as well.
A lot of the performers are from abroad then?
Yes. One of the things, Cedric Walker, the owner of the circus, one of the things he has done, he's traveled the world. He's probably traveled the world, the globe, several times over to find acts. He has scouts out there, but in order for it to be a Universal Circus type of act, he's going to have to see it. And he's going to have to be impressed because he knows our audience is hard to impress. And so he's going to travel, he's going to scout, he's going to take video, he's going to put things together, he's going to see how acts work against each other. And then we're going to see how the act works in our ring. And, when an act gets a standing ovation, when they get people up and clapping along with the music, that's what we're looking for.
Real quick, where are you in Brooklyn?
We are in Brooklyn right now. We're at Floyd Bennett Field. And after Brooklyn, we're going to Newark. And then after Newark, we're heading over to Baltimore and Norfolk and then Washington. And then we're headed west.
And did I hear Queens also separately from Brooklyn, or is that wrong?
That is correct. Queens, we're going to Roy Wilkins Park in Queens.
Awesome. And where can people get information?
Well, you can go to our website, universalcircus.com. You can go to our Facebook page. You can go to our Twitter page. You can go to our Instagram page. We're sometimes considered the most interactive circus in the world. And from the standpoint of getting up and giving high fives to the performers and to being able to reach us on social media, we're everywhere. So come and see us wherever you are.
It's a universal circus, and it's a universal circus. Thank you very much.
That's exactly right. Come out and see us.
And that is our program for today. We are here each week at this hour. Next time, a special for the 45th Earth Day, including analysis of the California drought. We'll also be thinking about the fate of the Earth on my daily radio program tomorrow, which is broadcast every weekday morning at 10 on WNYC, 93.9 FM and AM 820. I'm Brian Lehrer. Thanks for watching.